Well, Martin's not here, so I'll have to start off with evening, boys. How are you? You all right?
All good, Richie. All good.
Champion.
Good. So, everyone, as we've been promoting all week, we've got the great privilege of having Shaun Custis join on the show. So, Daz, do you want to bring Shaun into the show?
Here's Shaun. He's back in the green room and he's eating his Sunday supplement croissants at the moment. But we'll get him on. There he is.
Hi, how
Welcome,
you doing?
Shaun.
If I had £1 for everybody who says, "Oh, the croissants real, you'd eat them," I did, honestly. That was my breakfast. Honestly, on a Sunday morning, I always used to eat them. The directors go mad, though, because they've then got to put new croissants to replace them and new apples and new bananas. Good days, though.
Yeah, definitely were.
I was
what was that thing,
sorry?
You thought they were fake?
Yeah, plastic.
Shaun, I'd just like to say on behalf of all the lads at Loaded, very much appreciated that you've decided to come on the show. Very privileged. That's the first time podcast that you've ever done for any Newcastle orientated shows. So we're much appreciated, as I said. Been talking to you for about a month now. I tried to organise this date and finally got round to it. So what we're going to do is, all the viewers who are in the chat, if you've got any questions that you want to ask Shaun, get them in. Daz is going to make a note of them, and what we'll do is we'll try and get through as many of them as we can, more towards probably the second half of the show. So just to start off the show, Shaun, just give us a brief history of your career in sports journalism and also as a Newcastle fan.
Right. Well, I went to school, St Cuthbert's High School. It was grammar school then. Went to Darlington Journalist College, joined a newspaper called the Colville Nashby Times in Leicestershire because I, just tried to get a job anyway. Went to the Loughborough Echo, Derby Telegraph, Lincolnshire Echo, and then up to the Journal for a year, and the Chronicle for a year, where I worked with John Gibson. And if you think that was 1987 probably, and he's still going strong as Gibbo.
He sure is.
And that was a great grounding. I'll tell you what, working with Gibbo was just brilliant. He's a ball of enthusiasm and one of my big inspirations for journalism. Fantastic bloke, great to work with. Big character in the North East, probably a bigger character than a lot of the footballers that have ever played there. I mean, great. And also a great help me when I moved on to the national papers, which was the Sunday People in London. Then I moved back to Manchester with the People, back down to London with the Sunday People again, then joined Daily Express, Sunday Express, and then to the Sun, which is where I am now. And I've been there for 20 years. I was the chief football writer of the Sun, and now I'm head of sport for the Sun, involved in everything we do, online, in print, the lot, really.
Cool.
So that goes along with your talk sport, where you're part of press box with Dan Kelly on a Monday.
We bought the company, which is News UK, which owns the Times and Talk Sport. They bought Wireless Group about 4 years ago, and it's been brilliant for us. It's 5 floors up from where I work in the office in central London, and it's a fantastic, radio station to work with. We also have Talk Radio, which we go on, and they have Times Radio there, which we also spend a bit of time going on as well with my old mate Henry Winter from time to time. So yeah, I mean, it's a great place to work. Sky Sunday Supplement actually finished last year after we've been doing it I'd been doing it for about 23 years. I think it came to a natural end, really, because of COVID. I don't think a TV program, I think this is fine, but I don't think a TV program worked very well on Zoom, banter-wise, with all the interaction that we used to have on the Sunday morning. I don't think it worked so well. And I think, a lot of people say this, they were sorry to see it go and want it back and go the stick you used to get on Sunday mornings, and they would love to see it back. But I think, everything has its time. Things move on, and it had a very, very good run. I enjoyed it, though. It was great.
Yeah, the press box is doing quite well with you and Danny Kelly on a Monday night. I often listen to it on the way home from me weight loss football league on a Monday night in the car. But,
I love that. I mean, Danny's a superb presenter, isn't it? And the idea of that was sort of a Sunday supplement type thing on the radio. The guy who runs Talk Sport is called Lee Clayton. He used to be a reporter on the Sun and on the Daily Star, and he was sports editor at the Daily Mail. And now he runs Talk Sport, and he wanted to sort of recreate that on a Monday night. And it's been me and Danny. It was me, Danny, and Simon Jordan originally, and now it's me and Danny and another guest. So this week was Des Kelly off BT. Last week it was Martin Samuel. As I say, we get Henry Winter on, Ollie Holt, all of that, and it's pretty popular. It gets quite a lot of interaction the way the Sunday Supplement did.
Yeah, we actually jokingly sent out a tweet to Simon Jordan this week to see if he's been very opinionated on our takeover on TalkSport, but he hasn't responded to coming on the show and giving his opinion to all the Newcastle fans direct. So
I'll have to give him a kick. I'll give him a kick next time I see him. I do see him quite often and say you've got to go on it and see if he bites. Yeah,
that's much appreciated. Much appreciated, Shaun. So just going on to you, obviously you said you grew up in the Northeast and you're a Newcastle fan yourself. So what would you say your earliest memories are growing up and your fondest memories?
I think my first game, I'm a bit vague on this. I think my first game was a Fairs Cup game against Southampton. I think it was 1970. Definitely went with my dad. He tells me it was anyway. I've got vague recollections of that. Nottingham Forest when we went on the pitch, 3-1 down, 4-3 up and all that. I was at that, which was a bit scary being in the Leazes Inn, I've got to be honest. I've got memories of obviously the 74 Cup run. I was saying to you just off air before we started about how we went out to see Newcastle's open top bus parade after they'd lost the 74 Cup final, which you look back now and you think that's really embarrassing. But at the time it was, wow, we nearly won the Cup. And then they did it again in 1976, did another one. I've never seen us win a trophy. I don't remember us winning the Fairs Cup really in 69, although Ollie Burton used to live at the top of our street. And he had a very nice garden, and we used to see him in the morning tending to the garden. David Craig lived down the other end of the street. Willie McFall lived across the road. That's in those days when footballers just lived on your street. I lived in Wide Open where my mum and dad still are, and it was great to. I don't know. They were very normal people. It was great to be able to see them because you have pictures on your wall, don't you? Bob Moncur, who still looks fit as a flea every time you see him, and holding up the trophy. Pictures of him holding up the trophy, and you thought that we'd just always win trophies. Little did I know, it wouldn't be the case. I went to both cup finals, obviously, 98, 99. Pretty devastated by those, which is why you cling on to things like seeing us win the championship in 93, 4, which was actually, what Leeds had won the year before. So it goes Leeds United and then it goes Newcastle United on that trophy. That was a brilliant day. Beat Leicester when we beat Leicester 7-1. Loved that. Loved seeing the final game of Keegan against Brighton, the 3-0 win. Magnificent. What a day that was. It was wonderful. I don't recall being, you were saying before we started, I don't recall seeing us win the Texaco Cup final. I may have been, but I don't remember it. But I did go to an Anglo-Italian against Fiorentina. So I've seen that as well. And we've got to go back that far to think of glory days. Who wouldn't enjoy the 90s? Shearer, Keegan, nearly winning the league, the devastation. I can still see Cantona putting that ball in the net in James's Park, the 1-0 defeat against United. It was crushing, but some of the trips we had in Europe away, me and my mates for our 40th birthday, we decided whatever the draw was on this particular weekend, we would go there for a week for our 40th birthday. And I think the group was Milan, Barcelona, and Bayer Leverkusen, maybe. And it turned out that it was Leverkusen that became the one we were going to go away for our 40th birthday. But we had a brilliant week, stayed in Cologne. And fantastic. I was reporting on when we won the Champions League qualifier, 97, would that be in Zagreb, Croatia?
Part of that in Belgrade, wasn't it? Yeah.
Was it Croatia? I was there, and Custis scored really late on to put us through, tapping that out in the middle of the crowd. That was quite an evening. But it's never dull, is it? Following Newcastle, never dull. I wouldn't change it for the team I support. I'd love us to have more success, but it's given me some amazing memories as a reporter and as a fan. I think we did the double. Me and my mates did the double. Exeter City. Do you remember St James's Park, home and away? Has anybody done that? We drew an FA Cup tie at home. Drew an FA Cup tie at home, 1-1. They scored a late equaliser, and then the replay was like the following Wednesday. We lost, I think, 4-0 or something. That was eventful. Yeah, it's all bad stuff, isn't it? When you start going down that road,
it's like therapy session, Shaun.
Yeah.
But I've worked. I was lucky to work with Shearer on The Sun as well, doing columns with him, and got to know him very well, and did a talk-in show with him up in Newcastle a couple of years ago, actually 3 years ago, at St James's Park with him and Ian Wright, which was great fun. They're great raconteurs when the two of them get together, and he was a great hero of all of us, I think. Brilliant to watch. But I mean, even, before that, I got to know Malcolm MacDonald very, very well. And I love being in his company. God, a night out with Super Mac. Christ alive. What is that like? Mind you, I had a night out with Andy Carroll as well. And that was certainly in another bracket. However.
Do you know, it's really nice hearing you talk so passionately about the club we all love, because obviously with you, the job that you've got, you're more covered on national sport and other teams and stuff like that. So it's really refreshing to hear you actually talk with the same passion that we get to talk about on a weekly basis. So, it's one of the reasons why we wanted to get you on. So it takes us quite nicely into what we were talking about next, and your thoughts on the current NUFC status, which... not good, as you've previously said. It's never good following Newcastle. But so, what do you make of the current situation with Steve Bruce, the squad we've got, outlook for the season?
It just seems to be sort of in limbo, doesn't it? I think a lot of people just feel like we're in limbo. Nothing's happening takeover-wise. Nothing's happening. We're bringing in players. Look, I've got to put my hands up. I am quite a good friend of Steve Bruce, really. I mean, not sort of close now, but he was very, very good to me when I was in Manchester, when he played for Manchester United. I've always liked him, respected him. You're sort of not allowed to say that now as a Newcastle fan. It's like seen as heresy, but honestly, he is a good bloke. But I accept totally that Newcastle are not playing very good football. It's driving everybody mad. And, even... you'd have to be stupid not to think that it's pretty poor stuff. I mean, I did see some pretty poor stuff under Rafa Benitez as well. Some of it was very defensive, but probably this period of time we're going through now is probably one of the worst for quite some time, and it's hard work. There's no doubt about it. It's very difficult to get your enthusiasm up for it. It's very difficult to see where it all ends. It's very strange, I think, for us to be sort of on the same side as Mike Ashley, to try and get him out of the club, because he sort of wants to get out of the club and we want him to get out of the club. Whether I'm really, really passionate about a Saudi takeover, I'm torn on that. I've got to be honest. I think it's difficult to separate PIF from the Saudi royal family, and when they're responsible for some of the things they've been responsible for, including killing journalists.
Sure. Shaun, sorry to interrupt. Is that what's obviously you're not keen on the Saudi takeover? Is it their history that you're not keen on?
I just think they haven't been able to pay. I just think they haven't been able to prove that they are separate from what is a pretty awful regime. Now, I understand all the other issues that, the government deals with the Saudis. They trade with the Saudis. I really do get that. And, I'm the same as everybody else. I'd like to see the back of Mike Ashley too. But whether this is quite the right group, but then what is the right group? I was a part of the start of John Hall taking over in Newcastle. I mean, we worked on the Chronicle when we started a bid to buy up all the shares from what Gordon McKeague was the family called the family silver back in the late 80s, and that was a campaign that went on for 3 years. And I don't know whether you would remember it, but we had to go around basically identifying where every share was and getting people to buy them up. Well, so John Hall could buy them up because they were all owned by various individuals, and that was hard work. So I sometimes hear all this that's going on now as if it's the first time this has ever happened in a protracted takeover. There's been number of times before. I mean, the McKeague one was hard work for John Hall to take over, even though he had the money, couldn't get hold of the shares. And I think we'd all agree that once John Hall did get the club, he gave us some of the best times that some of us have had in our Newcastle United supporting live. So it can be worth it if you persist. I was in demos for getting Lord Westwood out in what would that be, 1974? People rioting is probably not the right word, demonstrating against Stan Seymour. I'm going back quite a while. There's always been a history of us trying to change the owners. What I always find frustrating is that getting a consensus seems so hard. Getting an agreement between all Newcastle fans about how they should go about a particular protest, it never seems to be all on the same page. There's so many disparate groups which don't seem able to come together and agree on a course of action. I've seen arguments for let's walk out the ground after 3 minutes, or let's not go in the ground, or let's not buy season tickets this season, or we'll not go to that game. And it never takes off. It's never complete. It's never everybody all singing from the same hymn sheet. I find that very frustrating because we sort of all want the same thing in the sense that we don't want Mike Ashley anymore, but how we go about it, there never seems to be any agreement.
Why do you think there is that sort of like, that divide, I think is the word that tends to be used recently? Why do you think that's the divide is so in the fan base at the moment?
Do you know, I think so many people are so passionate about the club, and you know what Geordies are like, they've got pretty strong opinions, that there's a group who have their idea and it's this way and it's got to be like that. That's the only way to do it. And I see, I love the passion that like Steve Wraith has, who you were talking about before. I like the fact he put so much effort into trying to get change and believes in the club. But I know that there's plenty of people who don't agree with the way he goes about it. But to me, he puts it out there that he's trying hard to make things better. But others don't like it. Others want to go off in a different direction. Think he's doing it for his own personal gratification and to make himself a celebrity. I don't see it like that. I think he's a very strong, passionate supporter who wants the best of the club. But I think there's a lot of people like that, but they're not all on the same side. It's quite annoying, isn't it? Don't you think, that not everybody can get together and all follow the same ideas to get what we all want?
I think you've said what certainly as Loaded lads have been thinking for quite a while now, in that it's been so frustrating. Certainly in this last sort of 18 months with COVID and the pandemic and everything that's been going on, I think it's heightened social media even more so. And I think it's heightened it to the fact that it's more obvious now within the fan base that it is divided. I think you're absolutely right in what you said. You've mentioned about Steve Wraith and the opinions of Steve Wraith, for and against. But, there are so many others in the fan base that are doing exactly the same as him for the right reasons. But because they're not on the same page for some reason, it's like they point the finger at Steve Wraith or they point the finger at somebody else that they're wrong for doing these things, but they're doing exactly the same.
Can I ask you lads, why you think it is that there's so many different groups? Why you think you can't get everybody else together?
I can say from my point of view that I think there's a level of within each of the different groups, what you find is there is someone at the top that wants to be in charge, that wants to be the poster person for whatever they are backing. And they don't like the fact that there's a potential that somebody, regardless of the fact that someone else is out there that's doing exactly the same, they don't like the fact that that person is on top. They want to be that poster person for whatever campaign, for whatever protest, for whatever goodwill they're doing for the club. They want to be that person on top. And I think they don't like the fact that other people are on top. So therefore, they're against them because they're not with them. And so that's where the battle commences effectively. It's a battle of power. It's a battle of who's at the top of the food chain in terms of the Newcastle fan base. And I think, there's a lot of egos in there. There's a lot of jealousy. There's a lot of envy with success of other podcasts and other people in the fan base for what they're doing. They can't just be happy that someone's doing something good for the club. It has to be that person's doing it for personal gain, or that person's doing it to become famous, or that person's doing it to be well known, or to get followers on Twitter or Instagram or whatever it is. There always has to be sort of a reason for their decision, and it's always a reason that's not actually for the benefit of the club. Whereas actually what you're finding is, and we've talked about this as Loaded Lads ourselves, there are so many people out there that are doing great things for the benefit of our club, but they all seem to be against each other for that reason, because they want to be seen as the pinnacle of what this fan base is all about.
Yeah, it seems to be the whoever is leading the particular charge, the particular protest, people don't like them, or they want to do their own thing, and there's never a collective. And I know that there's talks about more protests and talks about more of a collective trying to come together. But let's see if it brings about anything. I know apart from you, Richie, we're outside Newcastle. I live in the west of Ireland. Pete, you're in Leicester. Richie, you're up in Newcastle. But we kind of are outsiders looking in for when it comes to the protests kind of thing. But yeah, it would be interesting to see if something. If groups get together and can make their voices heard.
You never do. This has been going on for 50 years. Yeah. People have been in different camps. Honestly, they have. Really. Yeah. It never... I mean, I was talking about the McKeek protest before, when John Hall was trying to buy up the shares. There was a peaceful group who thought you could, get round, we'll buy up the shares eventually. There were the other people who thought you should stick a brick through each solicitor's window on Gossie High Street. Now, that they were two extremes too, and they couldn't agree on the best way to go about things. We were trying to preach caution on the Chronicle, and that we'd get there in the end, which they did. After I'd left the Chronicle, they did eventually get there. But for others, it just wasn't good enough. They wanted to turn to what I would say violent protests, which I don't agree with.
I think one of the things that, if look at the way things are even at the moment, it's since the lockdown, as Pete mentioned. We go back to, when they really started over this lockdown period, there was a lot of people against Steve Wraith. People saying he hadn't met Amanda Staveley. And then, but there's common knowledge between the whole, the people who follow on a day-to-day basis. He was the person who was told to Shaun, Amanda Staveley and Mirdad Guendouzi that the Liverpool game in 2018, he was sat with her. He was, and they have got that contact, and we know that. But some people just want to, just to say that that's all bollocks, basically, and it's not. And even stuff nowadays where we've got this NUFC protest, and we have the Transparency March on Westminster in London last month, and we were quoting a lot of numbers in that, and you start to think when a lot of the numbers, we were talking close to over 500 to 1,000 people going down, and then when you get down there, there's 200, you start to think, have the people from the other side of the fan base been winding this part up to try and get them as though it's going to be more successful than it is? And obviously now there's another situation with Keith from NCSL, who's been doing a lot of fantastic work trying to get the CAF case brought into the public domain and stuff like that. But people don't like what he's been doing about it and stuff like that, and saying he's not a proper fan. And then you even go to what the trust have done with the 1892 pledge as well, and trying to raise some money to buy 1%. Now, don't get me wrong, I think that's an absolutely fantastic idea. I just don't think it's something that's ever going to be feasible in the next, say, 10 years. With the way that the Premier League is now and the cost of clubs to run and to own, 1%, if you're looking at Newcastle's value of 340 million, you're looking at 1%. it's nothing really. It's probably going to be a pie in the sky. I think fantastic idea. Don't get me wrong. It's just the way the economics are in football nowadays. I just don't think it's feasible. You'd probably have to drop down the leagues drastically to even be in a position to, make it worthwhile. I know that the trust to turn around said it was a fantastic idea. They took it off. I think it was Hearts, wasn't it, Pete, that they got the idea from when we had Alex on last week. But it's Newcastle compared to Hearts. It's like David and Goliath type thing. You're never ever going to be able to afford 1% if Newcastle United under the current circumstances. I agree. That it'd be good that it goes to the fan base. It'll go to charity afterwards if it doesn't go through and stuff like that. But they're even going to try and approach the new consort if it goes through and see if they'll allow them to buy 1%. But I still can't see that's going to be that would happen either. It's a shame that we can't all just try and put, as you said, Shaun. When this fan base is united in the ground, when we're watching good football on a week-to-week basis. We were renowned as the 12th man. Everybody hated to come to St James's Park. We physically made a difference to that team and against the opposition. Look at even with Joe Willock, he came up a few years ago on his debut for Arsenal, and we weren't the fantastic when he came up, but he still remember how intimidating it was, and we're on top of them and how great we were as a fan base. And that's in our bad days as a fan base. So it can show what this fan base is capable of if we actually, go by the second part of our club's name. If we're united, we are, we're an animal. And I just don't understand how, for the bit, everybody wants Mike Ashley out, as you said before, Shaun. We've got to pull in the right direction and get rid of him. Not say this, that. That's not good. That's not good. He said this, say that. Not going to happen. Just pull in the same direction. That's one of the things we're trying to do on Load, is trying to get all these podcasts together we're trying to be impartial, to give everybody the sake of the opinion. Like me and you did, Shaun, when we had a phone call. I felt like I was having a 20-minute interview with you, but it was good because we got all aspects of different things, in that conversation, and it's good, and that's why we're having different podcasts on different weeks, different people who've been on this podcast or have been a guest on this one, because we want to try and bring the fan base together. It might be, as I said before, a pie in the sky type of idea, but why not try it at least? Someone's going to try and do it. So why not?
You're not allowed. It seems to me you're not allowed to have different views and to air them and have a bit of a debate about it and then see the other side and then maybe come to a consensus. We seem to have gone past that now. We seem to have gone to the point where if you're not on board with this idea, then do one and we'll go that way and you can get lost. And you can't, as I say, there are certain things now. It's society's like that now. There's no middle ground. You take one position or you take the other position. And I think that's probably another reason why we can't establish a consensus to go forward. But it's not easy anyway. Even if you get a consensus, it's not easy. The best consensus, I suppose, would be for everybody to boycott the game. But there's still a lot of people who just don't want to turn up. They're just not prepared to do that. There's thousands of fans who, COVID apart, have never missed a game since 1980 or something like that, and they don't like to miss one. People hate missing the match, and I really get that as well. So, quite what we come up with, I'm not I'm not really sure, but I do think probably a boycott of the game is the best way to go. But
the other bad thing about a boycott is that's where they always say you should be supporting the team on the pitch. If you don't turn up to support the team, it's the team that loses the benefits, sort of thing. So it's a catch-22 situation with the boycott, isn't it? Really. So perhaps we just need to do a grander scale of Oldham from last week and just see if we. But that means putting more money in Mike Ashley's pocket, sports direct, to go and buy the tennis balls, doesn't it? So
I just think, from my point of view, I just think it could never happen. We're so passionate as a fan base, as Newcastle fans. We are so passionate. We are so entwined with the football club that I don't think people can physically stay away from the game.
No,
it's we talk about it. It's ingrained into the fabric of Newcastle as a city. There's always the talk that it's a very sort of city that you work for your weekends. You work for the fact that you have the Saturday in the pub with your mates. The walk to the ground. getting into the stadium, soaking up the atmosphere, enjoying the game, but then going out after the game for a few drinks and maybe a meal, and you know, really enjoying the Saturday night. It's all part of the experience of supporting Newcastle, and I really don't believe that any fans are in a position to just not go.
No, I'm not advocating. I'm not saying do it. I'd find it very difficult to do it myself. I'm just saying that to me seems to be the only way you can really show.
I agree with you.
How you feel? I can't think of any other way that's a peaceful. And I'm advocating peaceful protest. I can't think of any other way of doing it, really.
Yeah. I agree with that. I just think if it was any other club, other than Newcastle, I think it could work. And I do think, you know, it would be the best way to really show our displeasure, because I think the ownership for the last 13, 14 years is an ownership that has banked on the fact that we turn up every week. Mm-hmm. And I think we've known that for so long now. And I think the only way is that showing it by using our feet, by not attending games. But like I said, it goes back to my point. It is so, you know, it's sewn into the fabric of us as supporters that we just can't stay away. It doesn't matter how bad we are, and I talked about it the other week on one of our shows. It doesn't matter how bad we are. It doesn't matter how bad we're playing. It doesn't matter what league that we're playing in. You know, you've got a game day coming up. Newcastle fans turn up. You know, we have 2,000-3,000 allocation of fans. They get filled up. Even if it's not through season ticket holders, the memberships pick it up. If it's not, it's through general sale. They will always get picked up. We will always take a travelling, no matter how bad we are, and we will sing for 90 minutes, and we will out-sing the home fans, and we will prove just how loyal we are, you know, even in our darkest moments, to this club. And Mike Ashley banks on that. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that if we were ever to just walk away and not bother to turn up, you know that the club is on its knees. It is gone. Because
the thing I find like that. It doesn't. Owners, I think, are a bit dense sometimes, because it doesn't take much sometimes to turn things around with a few astute signings. And I'm not saying we would ever say, you know, Mike Ashley, we love you, but you look at what's happened at West Ham, where they fans absolutely are not having Golden Sullivan, right? A few astute signings like Kufal and Souček. Mikel Antonio comes back fit. The place is rocking last week, 60,000 in a stadium they hate. Now you don't hear a word of protest, just because they've managed to get the team together with a few, as I say, astute signings. Everybody's just, suddenly the West Ham fans are loving it. And that is a turnaround in about a year, and it's the same ownership, and they haven't spent that much money either.
Top of the league, yeah.
So, Daz, I was going to say, Daz, have we had any questions coming in? Just obviously, we'll talk about the takeover and stuff like now. So, anything come on that you want to bring up?
Yeah, we have one question that's been asked about 10 different times in 10 different ways, and on tweets today. So, I'll put this. I had it up on screen there a second ago. So it's this one, Shaun. In respect to alleged corruption within the takeover process, as well as the cartel being in operation within the Premier League, why has there been no investigative journalism into this potentially huge story?
Well, first thing first, who knows whether there has been or not? How do you know? You can't. Stories like this don't turn up in 5 minutes. They take a lot of effort. They take a lot of manpower. They take a lot of money. What is the alleged corruption within the Premier League? Tell me. What is it?
Well, if we're to
people say it's corrupt, yeah, but how is it corrupt? You can't say it. Right. So let's say something about somebody who runs the Saudi royal family. You fancy getting sued for that? Because they've got a lot bigger pockets than you've got. So you've got to be very, very careful about what you say and do. I remember on The Sun when Gary Hoffman took over as chairman of the Premier League. It was, I think, last April, maybe last May. And we did a back page saying that there was a conflict of interest because he had obviously run Northern Rock and done the sponsorship deal with Northern Rock. I got a phone call from the Premier League the next morning when it was in the back page of the Sun saying, you can't say that. That's ridiculous. Gary Hoffman hasn't actually started work yet. He'd been appointed and he's not starting for another month, and the takeover will be sorted by then. I got told about that by the Premier League.
Wow.
And I went, oh, all right. Fine. And of course, Gary Hoffman actually started working straight away from the moment he got appointed. I genuinely don't know what his input is one way or the other, but I know he's been involved in in discussions about the takeover and in what's going to happen. But I can't say for certain what he's been doing, but I know he's been involved. And to me, having been sort of indicated by the Premier League that it would be sorted before he took over, officially, we ended up with this. There were people connected with Amanda Staveley, who I know, who said, yep, it's fine. It's all approved. Look, I know we had these stories. Many people have done them. Yep, it's all approved. It's going through. It's smashing. Nothing to see here. And then suddenly, bang, it stopped. And let's be honest, nobody really knows all the details of that. And finding that out is proving next to impossible. I argued on TalkSport the other week. I really don't understand this. The Premier League really doesn't have an official spokesperson, somebody who stands up, fronts up. Now, this is the biggest league in the world, the most richest league in the world. Richard Masters is chief executive, but he's not really their spokesperson. Gary Hoffman, you never hear from. They don't have anybody who you can really ask questions to, who will be quoted, who will stand up and represent the league. And I think that's a disgrace, actually, for such a big organisation which represents so many fans. Even if they're going to say, "Look, I can't get into it," but there isn't even anybody who says that. So I think that's something they should be addressing. They're clearly caught in some sort of legal minefield here, but I do think they have a duty, even just to say, "Look, we're really sorry to Newcastle fans. We would love to be able to explain this to you, but I'm afraid we can't for legal reasons." They don't even say that. They just hide behind and just no comment, nothing to say. And that is hugely frustrating.
I think from a fan base point of view, what we're really frustrated about is the fact that there's been so much going on about the Premier League said that they're confident they're going to win their case. But why is it there seems to be this delay tactic all the time? Obviously, from a media perspective, even if you look from a national press rather than a local fan like yourself, Shaun, how does that not make you think about a governing body that the Premier League, Richard Masters came out at the turn of the year and said, we want this resolved in a timely manner. And here we are nearly 9 months later, still no further down the line. And every time we have a court date, their lawyers are basically kicking it down the curve a bit further and a bit further. But apparently they've got, they're confident they're going to win the case. So why aren't we hearing the case? Why aren't we getting this in?
Well, exactly. That's my point. And as far as I understand it, it's not something that's even been debated. I mean, every club has a member on the board of the Premier League of the 20. I don't think it's even the case of them actively opposing it with a vote or anything like that. I think there are some who are against it, the takeover happening, but I don't think there's been a vote on it or anything like that. It's literally been left to Richard Masters and I think Gary Hoffman to just deal with it and their legal eagles. I don't know. I would love to be able to say I know what's going to happen next week, next month, but let's be honest, nobody does. Nobody's nailed it. Nobody's come up with a proper explanation for it. And I don't think we're any nearer getting that at the moment.
So personal thoughts, Shaun. Obviously, you mentioned that you didn't know if you were 100% behind this takeover because of the Saudi aspect of the consortium. But on a personal view, what do you think will happen with this takeover? Do you think it will go ahead eventually, or do you think it'll be?
Sorry, I really just don't know now. I mean, they pulled out. Let's be honest, they pulled out of it, didn't they? But when they pulled out of it, we all thought, well, yeah, they pulled out of it, but that's only to make the Premier League kick the Premier League into action. As far as I understand, we've tried to get into it. I really don't get the Reuben brothers part in it. I don't I mean, they could afford it on their own.
Yeah.
I don't know why they've got to be aligned together with the Saudis. I don't know why they couldn't do it separately, for instance, because I would presume that the Reuben brothers themselves would get it over the line. So why can't they do that? It seems to me that they're more than rich enough to do it, but they don't want to. It's a takeover, I still say, which is fraught with complications all the way. I've got to be honest. I'd be very surprised now that if it is that consortium that the Saudis do take it over in the end, because I think it's just gone on too long and they've probably lost a certain amount of enthusiasm for it, I would think. There was a lot of resentment, though, on the Premier League, among Premier League chairman clubs about the fact about the piracy in Saudi Arabia. There's no doubt about it. It was a real issue. It was costing the Premier League a lot of money, and there were a lot of very angry people about that fact. And it's still a sticking point, I believe, that they can't separate PIF from the Saudi royal family or government.
It seems like it's the only thing really that's stopping this progressing any further.
Well, we presume that, don't we? But then you feel like there's got to be something else as well.
There has to be, Shaun, because you made a really good point in that way back when all of this sort of like came to a head, and whether it was Companies House and all the rest of it around April 2020, what you were mentioning there in terms of the conversations around sort of Gary Hoffman and his involvement and all the rest of it. Amanda Staveley is adamant that around that time that things were going to go through.
I would agree with that.
Everyone keeps making this reference of no red flags. So many journalists, including yourself now, and you've mentioned it, said the same thing. There were no red flags. Everything was going swimmingly. And then I think this is the frustration for the Newcastle fans. Is all of a sudden it came to a stop. There was no red flag, no red flags. There was there was days, hours, minutes even, where people were expecting the announcement to be made that it was done, and that's talking from people more in the know than us as fans. That was people like journalists and that were expecting it to be told and were given from good sources from their opinion that it was so close. And this is why we're frustrated, and this is why you go back to proving it. I can't personally prove it as an individual. I don't think any of us can, but that's where our frustration as fans comes from. There is something not quite right about this, in that it can be close to being done to the point where days and hours are away from the deal being signed off, and then all of a sudden nothing. And it's not just nothing; it's a case of like radio silence for weeks. Then after that point, and
True.
It goes on to then expand onto other things, because obviously the consortium did pull out of the deal, and whether it was to make a point to the Premier League or to be able to go into other channels, we don't know. But Dave further up on our chat just makes a point. He was like, asked the question about the interference of sort of like Liverpool, Spurs, BN Sport. We will never know the real truth about that. But being
sports, whether you like Richard Keys and the gang or not, they had a right to complain about it. They were paying for the rights for Premier League football out there, and they were pirating the product. So they were allowed to complain. You can't argue with that. But they were paying the Premier League a lot of money. Eh?
But if there's talk, and I don't know this for sure, but there's talk of a letter being out there where it was directly sent to Premier League clubs. Isn't that sort of lobbying those clubs to enforce or try and influence a decision? Would you not say that that's wrong?
Well, no. If it's your property which is being in effect pirated by the Saudis, which they felt it was, then I don't see what they were doing wrong in that sense. We might not like it, but they felt they were getting they weren't getting their full value for what they were paying for, and the Premier League agreed. The Premier League are very hot on rights all over the world. They're very, I mean, you just got to see how they clamp down just even on social media on a Saturday afternoon. If you try to post a clip, they're hot, red hot on it, and they really don't like it. It's one of their big bugbears. So, you know, I didn't really have an issue with beIN Sports complaining about that. It's just then, how do you then deal with? You tell the Saudis, pack it in. Have they packed it in? Have they proved they packed it in? And have they proved they're separate and got nothing to do with the royal family and the ruling government? I don't know if they have or not. It certainly doesn't seem like it if we're still going on with this.
So just following on from, obviously we're talking about the cartel effect and possibly the Newcastle takeover. What's your personal thoughts on the ESL and the cartel and stuff like that? How obviously the so-called Big Six gone behind the Premier League's back to obviously set up this European Super League, and then basically the Premier League, when they decide to come crawling back, then say, what would you like your fine to be? What's your thoughts on stuff like that?
Well, I hated the European Super League. I hated the concept. It's something that's been in the air before, and they tried to drive it through without even talking to fans. I mean, people we knew in those clubs who'd been, you know, keeping it a secret. Let's be honest. I do think if it had been 1997 when this happened, or 96, that we might well have gone along with it as well. It's all right us saying now, oh, this is terrible. They're appalling, these clubs. Kick them out of football. We don't want them kicked out of football. We want to play matches against them and beat them if we can. But I am quite sure Newcastle United would have happily been part of it when we were top of the league, second in the league, whatever.
We could have been sitting at this table, so Shaun, at that stage. You're thinking on this there, yeah?
Of course we would. And we'd have been laughing at everybody else and saying, we're in the Super League. But I thought it was what an example of a fans' protest that was, lads. Everybody got together, all sang from the same hymn sheet, and got it overturned in about 2 days. That was amazing. Pretty much non-violent protest. It was an incredible. I've never seen football fans come together the way they did over that, and football fans of the clubs who were involved, who made it. I mean, some of the chief execs and owners at the big clubs were absolutely shocked by the reaction, and they were totally shocked abroad as well. The European clubs thought they'd get this through no problem because they were big boys, and they needed us more than we needed them. You know, it seems amazing to say it that Barcelona, Real Madrid, Juventus needed the Premier League more than we needed them. We don't need them at the moment. Ours is a very, very strong, powerful league with a great competitive aspect about it from top to bottom. And they misjudged the mood spectacularly. And it was great to see it slapped down.
I think it highlights with the Barcelona's financial situation how much they need the ECL. But I think the one thing that annoyed a lot of people was the fact that, you know, surely it should have been the Premier League and the 14 other members who handed out the punishment to the 6 who wanted to leave, not the Premier League turning around and asking them, how much would you like to be fined? And then, you know, you walk, I think it was it 4 million in total or something like that, each team over a certain amount of time, which 4 million, it's pocket change to these clubs. It surely.
So what? Are you that? I mean, do you care really? I mean, all right, they tried to form a European Super League. They got slapped down spectacularly. We want to play them every week. All right, so you want to fine them. All right, you want to tell them they'd be naughty boys, but how much do you want to fine them, and what do you want to do with the money? Redistribute it around the rest of us?
When it actually happened, I actually said I would like to see the money go to grassroots football, because I used to coach in grassroots football, and obviously I know there's, you know, some places don't have fantastic facilities and stuff like that. I'm not bothered about the money coming to Newcastle or any of the other 14 clubs that were part of it. That's how I would like to see it. I just think I think 4 million, it's neither here nor there. As I said, it's like pocket change to them. You know, I think obviously the way that the fans complained against it proved to them how bad that, you know, English football fans wanted them to stay and didn't want them to leave the Premier League. And it was nice that they turned around and you know, came back and realised what true football fans wanted. However, I still think it was they might as well have not bothered fining them or giving them any sanctions because it was nothing really. That's all. I think they should have come down harder on them, even though they wanted to come back into what the Premier League is and what we all love. That's just my thought. That's all.
You didn't want them kicked out of the Premier League, though, did you?
No, didn't want them kicked. Didn't want them kicked out. But
make it uncomfortable for them, though. Dock them points.
Yeah, but you say that. All right, you say that. That's fine. But what about the fans of those clubs? Those fans of those clubs didn't want their owners to do what they did. They protested vehemently against them. So if you're docking points, you're docking points from those fans who never wanted it in the first place. So basically, you're docking points from a billionaire owner, aren't you?
Yeah, and there's plenty of things that we want as well. For example, a takeover. We don't get our wish either. Why should we be miserable and they always be the ones that are signing Ronaldo? By some mischance,
we had happened to be one of those 6 under Mike Ashley, and they'd said, "Right, you're getting points deducted." You think we'd have taken that very well? No.
No, but I think there would have been a level of understanding. I mean, speaking
really?
In terms of docking points, which I think, let's be honest, would have been more of a reality rather than kicking them out of the league. I was quite vocal on it initially. I was, kick them out of the league, blah, 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 blah. Initial thoughts. It was never going to happen, let's be honest. But, the talks of maybe docking points was more of a reality in the early set. And speaking to a lot of the fans of the top 6, they can understand why the rest of English football were frustrated with it, because they were equally frustrated, and I think that's why they protested so hard. But ultimately, it's the owners of these top 6 that are trying to bully their way to a point in which they can dominate the footballing market, and that's what it is. But for them to get a measly couple of million fine, it is nothing. This is a separate conversation, because we can talk about fines across the board, whether it's fines for red cards or disturbances with fans or with racism. They're not enough. The fines are not enough in football for how much money, particularly English football, for how much money these clubs earn.
But they thought they could use it when they didn't get their way, the European Super League. They actually initially thought, oh well, this will give us leverage anyway to tell the rest of the Premier League how we want things being run from now on, that we get a bigger share of the pie from the European competitions, that we get more of our own gate money, that we get, we can lay down the law to them. And they got an almighty slapping down for that as well. And they really did end up with the tail between their legs. I think the embarrassment value was massive, actually, and that they will find it very difficult to come back to the table again with anything, even in the Premier League, that they want now to get done for themselves, because they're going to get slapped down. By doing what they did, it'll be a while before they can come back with anything else again. So it was a good thing in many ways. They have been punished in some ways, and we've kept a great Premier League together and possibly more competitive than ever.
Just I suppose, linked into that, I remember at the time, Man United fans disrupted a game. There was the Liverpool game, and the game couldn't go ahead, had to be rescheduled towards the end of the season. I wonder what would happen if that happened with Newcastle. Would we get dock points? Would we get the game rescheduled? This is Newcastle. We're not Man United.
Yeah, it is an interesting question. I think they can be treated differently. But then again, I mean, I said it wasn't violent protest. It still wasn't really violent protest. It was a bit lively that night, to be fair. But by and large, it wasn't violent protest. And these were the fans making their point against the billionaire owners. How hard would it have been, do you think, for the authorities to actually take points off the club where the fans were actually in the right? Pretty much. And I know what you're saying, but it wouldn't have worked, would it? I mean, it would look really bad. It would. But I take your point.
So as we're getting into the last part of the show anyway, what we'll do is obviously talk about Newcastle and the current situation as well. It's now 3 days before the end of the transfer window, Shaun. Have you got anything that could give us NUFC fans a positive outlook after a dismal start to the season so far?
No, it's going to really rub it in if Armstrong scores, isn't it? In Southampton. And I've seen lots of, so we're doing stories tomorrow about the fact. Oh, they are. That was good, Rich.
There he is.
Picture. Armstrong and Tony, you know, how we'll let them go and look at them now and else. What a double act they would have been. But, I mean, I don't know. Would they have been a great double act for Newcastle? And who let them go? Was it? Rafa let them go. But they're unproven, aren't they, really, in the Premier League? We don't really know if they're going to cut it in the Premier League. Tony looked great in the Championship, got to be honest. Armstrong's looked good for Blackburn. No, I'm not particularly aware of anything that's bubbling under. I don't think we're going to be going out and spending 40 million on a Joe Linton type few. I don't see anything like that happening. Look, he's got to get something. You'd have to say, wouldn't you? We need to strengthen desperately, but
where, Shaun? Where do you think?
Don't you think it's everywhere?
Well, of course. I mean, we could strengthen in every position on the pitch, but where do you think if Steve Bruce has got maybe, you know, a couple of spaces in his 25-man squad that he can go out and look, he's not going to pay money. He's already mentioned that he's got no money to spend because he spent it all and more on Willock. But if he's got a couple of loans available to strengthen in the squad, where do you think he really does need to strengthen before their window shuts in a few days' time?
Wow. Look, I mean, I always cringe when the ball comes in the box. I think in central defence we're pretty poor. I don't rate our defence particularly, but then I don't think the midfield's dynamic enough, and I think it needs to help feed what could be a good forward line, but I don't think it gets decent service from midfield. Maybe Willock will solve that, but then we had all this fuss about signing Willock. Brilliant, what a great signing! Which you're very good at this. Sticking another picture up. Get him in, brilliant, Joe Willock. But most of the time last week we were using him as a substitute. I mean, you know, this is somebody who we're celebrating about signing, but we didn't actually think he was good enough to start all the time towards the end of last season. We want players, don't we, who we know are guaranteed starters. I'm actually a little surprised that we've still got Saint-Maximin. I thought there'd be a hell of a barter going on for him, and we may not be out of the woods on that yet. I mean, you're saying bring people in. Can we make sure we keep hold of him past September?
Don't say that.
I believe. I've always said. I thought he'd stay another year. You know, he just signed his 6-year contract, sort of around October time last season, and that was to secure him for sort of another couple of years. The fact that I thought it was quite telling in Callum Wilson's interview with Alan Shearer, funny enough, where he talked about that him and Alan Saint-Maximin had spoken about him, you know, simplifying his game to ensure that he got more assists and he got more, sort of improved his stats, because he was very clear that he wants to go to Qatar 2022 for the World Cup. And obviously Callum Wilson's got ambitions of getting back into the England squad. And I think, you know, you look at the players like Bamford, who's just been added to the England squad for the upcoming internationals. And you look at the likes of Danny Ings, and you look at the likes of Ollie Watkins that have come into the squad recently. I'd put Callum Wilson on all of them in terms of, you know, equally as good, if not better than one or two of them. So, you know, they've got ambitions of getting there. And I think they're best placed now to really prove that this season. What I'm disappointed about is that, you know, we've started so poor, and those guys have played in both of those games. And, you know, they really need to step up. It's pressure on them, but if they want to go and maybe play at a World Cup, they need to be able to handle that pressure. So we're really expecting those guys to step it up. The only big concern I've got about both of them is their injury record. And I think that, you know, although, you know, you can argue about how many strikers we've got, I still believe we need a backup for Callum Wilson, because if he gets injured, we don't have the same caliber, nowhere near the same caliber of quality striker to come in and replace him for a period of time. You got the man on there who is a very talented striker at championship level, but he's always been that striker that is he could play for a West Brom who look like they're going to absolutely smash the championship this season, but when he comes to the Premier League, it just seems like a step too far.
I do wonder about him. I mean, I've seen him play. I mean, I remember him in a famous game for Crystal Palace where they came back to draw 3-3 with Liverpool. He had an amazing game that night. I was there. He scored twice, Dwight Gale. And I've always quite liked him as a striker. And I don't know whether I'm missing something, but he never seems to have been given a run at all. Maybe I missed it. Maybe he did get a decent run and everybody thought useless. We've never really tried playing him off Callum Wilson and seeing how it goes over an extended period of time, have we?
No, and there was a time when Wilson was injured and he didn't get the run out then, and Bruce was saying that he's always wanted to sign Dwight Gale, and then when he had him and he had the opportunity to play him, he didn't. So it's big question marks there.
The biggest issue for that, because I agree with you, Shaun. I do think that, you know, Dwight Gale and Callum Wilson, two guys that can score goals playing alongside each other, can work. I went to a pre-season game against Rotherham. And they played the first half together up front. And actually, some of their link-up play was actually pretty decent. But the problem is that you've got two strikers there that can score goals, but they need service. So that's where Alan Saint-Maximin comes in, because Alan Saint-Maximin cannot play as a wing-back. He just can't because he hasn't got the ability to defend. So you're not going to play him in midfield because we play three midfielders. You've already got Almiron and Fraser that are playing out of position in those positions. So the only place he can really play is up front. And if he's fit and firing, he starts. And I think that's the biggest problem, is that you'll never get those two playing in the same team because you need someone that's going to give them the ammo. There's someone that's going to be creative enough to put balls on the plate for them.
Have you not been disappointed in the likes of Fraser and Ritchie, who I thought were really good players when they were at Bournemouth, who were quite dynamic, offered them a lot, kept them in the Premier League, and yet don't seem to have done it for us?
I've got an opinion on Ryan Fraser that I've kind of held for quite a while, in that, you know, I think the criticism of Ryan Fraser has been harsh since he signed for the club. Now, you know, for a player that was sort of, you know, quoted or valued at the best part of 30 million when he had the 16-17 assists the season before COVID for Bournemouth, and Arsenal and Tottenham were after him, and he was highly sought after. You can argue that he's partly to blame because, you know, when COVID shut down, he refused to play in the restart for Bournemouth because he was going on a free transfer. You could argue that, and it didn't show him in a good light. However, he hadn't then played for 6 months before he signed for us. He signed for us a matter of days before the season started. No pre-season. And if you're a professional footballer, if you played football at any level, you know if you don't have a pre-season that you are not at the maximum condition to play, especially at elite football level. So that's where the niggly injuries came in. And ultimately, if you look at his performances for Newcastle last season, he never got a run of games. So it was always the case. And I was saying on our match day lives, you know, last season in the build up to the end of the season, he needs a run of games. He needs a pre-season. Going to the Euros was great for him. He was training regularly. He only got a few minutes here and there, but he was keeping himself ticking over. He's had a pre-season. He's played in pretty much every game and started most of them. He's scored, he's got assists, but then he finds himself in the first game of the season on the bench. So how is he going to be able to perform and show his ability if he's not going to get a run of games? I mean, I was saying to Chris or Chris Hall or the guy Unloaded on our show last night, Away Days, you know, for me, I'd be saying I'd be putting Almiron on the bench tomorrow because he looks tired. He's not performing, and when someone's not performing, they need to be told that they need to up their game. And Ryan Fraser's chomping at the bit. I would be saying to Ryan Fraser, right, you've got 3 games for me now, or 4 games for me to show what you're capable of. Southampton, Man United away, Leeds at home, Watford away. They're your games to show me that you deserve to be starting in this team week in, week out. And at least there's a mindset that you know you can play every week. You're prepared to put that in because you know you're going to be starting. And he's not had that yet.
Cool. So
Interesting.
it's literally come to the end of the show now. So I'd like to say thank you very much for Shaun for joining us on his first ever Newcastle podcast appearance.
Cheers,
We
Shaun.
would love to have you on the show again sometime
Cheers,
in
lads,
the
it's great.
future. But just before we want to go, the final question is, what's the score going to be tomorrow, and how do we finish this season in your opinion if things stay as they are?
1-1, 17th.
There we go.
Ooh. I have another question for you, Shaun, and it's linked to the news today. Will Ronaldo start, and will he score against us in potentially his first game
As you
for
say, that's
Man
going to be
United?
his first game, isn't it? I was
Yeah.
trying to think of Ronaldo games against Newcastle. I was trying to wrap my brains about them.
He scored a hatful against us over the years. He scored an absolute hatful against us. He really has at St James's and at Old Trafford. So,
I love watching him. I've got to say, I'm like you. I think he's such a great player. It will just be our luck to run into him when he's determined to prove, he's still got it in the first game against us. He's a great player. I think it's brilliant for the Premier League. I know he's 36 and a half, but I still think it's brilliant for the Premier League to have him back. He's a real showman. It's great. We used to like showmen. Well, we do like showmen still at Newcastle, don't we? We've got one of our own, St Maximum, and they've got the real deal there, though, haven't they? Look at them.
He's my idol. He's the best player of all time, in my opinion. No one will tell me anything different. I've followed his career all the way through since he came through as a young lad at Man United. I've just been infatuated by him. How hard he's had to work to be successful the way he is.
Yeah.
He's not, he's been very honest. He's not naturally gifted, but he's worked hard at his abilities to get better as a player and to continue and maintain that level for as long as he's been at through hard work and dedication. You can do, in my opinion, you can do nothing but admire him. But I've got one last question for you. The other lads have asked you the question. Do you believe, in your opinion, that Steve Bruce will last the season as Newcastle United manager?
I think it's possible, yeah. I do think it's possible. I don't think Mike Ashley's shown any inclination to sack him. I think if Newcastle, this is sort of what happened last season, isn't it? Have a little bit of a bad run, then pick up a few points, just enough to think, well, that's all right. We'll stumble on. It could be, I still have a feeling it'll be the same this season. Personally, I've got to be honest. I'd love him to succeed. I recognise that most of the fan base don't think he will and don't even want him to, but I'd like him to. But yeah, I'm going to go and say yes, he'll make it to the end of the season. Probably.
He's definitely going to buy you a pint next time he sees you, Shaun.
I'm hoping
to be fair.
I'm hoping you're saying that because we end up in the top half. But I'm hoping it straws there just a little bit.
I know it's not a popular thing to say, but there you go.
Nice one.
Fantastic. Shaun, really appreciate your time on.
Right, it's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed it, everybody. Thanks.
Yeah.
Come on the tune for tomorrow.
Come on the tune, that's right.
Thanks, Shaun. Thanks very much, Shaun, and thanks to everyone in the chat. And if you enjoyed the show tonight, you know where the like and subscribe button is on the channel, and you'll never miss another show again in the future. But everyone, have a fantastic weekend. You too, Shaun, and to Daz and Pete too. Good night.
Take care, everyone.
Nice.
Bye-bye.